place to be is living free in Tennessee.
Welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Monday, July 7th, 2025. This is episode 1060 of Living Free in Tennessee. It's a Monday show, so it's anything goes today, but we do have our usual segments. And before we dive into what we're going to talk about, I have two things to talk about. And the first one is the shooting of the two firefighters in Idaho. We didn't talk about that last week. I think I talked about it on the Tuesday Live a little bit, but there's been some stuff going on lately that is out of our circle of control. And that's a really good example of one that's out of our circle of control. But Clydesdale Homestead today on our Telegram group was posting about how they've been, involved, praying for all of those things for the victims and the families of the firefighters who were shot last week and killed. And they were lured out there by a psychopath who lit a wildfire, which is like a whole nother scale of thing that I'm not going to go into right now. But maybe don't light the forest on fire. But obviously, it was a person who was not doing good. They were doing evil. And some people died as a result of this. But the bigger macro picture here is even though it's outside of our circle of control, I think that we are at a time where putting positive back into our world is important. And so praying for their families and, putting that positive back rather than dwelling on the negative is something I think is pretty important. And in this case, the bigger concern is if there's a fire somewhere, are firefighters less likely to run in? I was this weekend talking to somebody about PTSD who has heard Tactical's story, and they were like, what I went through was not as bad as what he went through, but they sort of knew what they went through. And by the way, it was terrible. And I thought, or I said, well, that may be as bad. Who knows? Like only the mental impact of the PTSD or the situation on you. But one of the things that happens when we are exposed to traumatic situations is when something looks like, echoes, or is similar to that traumatic situation, we change how we react to it, right? And this totally relates to what we're going to talk about later in the show, which is victim or victor. Your perspective matters. So the danger of having a situation like what happened in Idaho from a bigger picture, besides the horrible impact on people's families, is what if there's a fire and people are hesitating to go in and do what firefighters do because we do depend on them to put fires out, right? Now they're thinking, am I going to get shot? And it's similar to when I lived in DC when we had a sniper that was just shooting people while they were putting gas in their cars and stuff, just seemingly random killing of people. And that made you think twice about, is this the time that I'm filling up my car and I'm going to get shot? So the other lesson here is, are you where you need to be if something does happen to you or to somebody in your family? Are you ready for that? Have you done your documentation? Have you set up your wills or trusts or all of that? Have you set things up in a way that makes sense? Do you have a life insurance policy if you have children dependent on you? Thinking about some of those things is never fun. But then when some of these horrible things happen, it's actually a good reminder to prioritize the important over the urgent. Which brings me to the second thing I wanted to talk about today, and that it's harder for me to talk about because children died this weekend. And I know children die all the time, but this one was particularly poignant for us here in Tennessee, I'm sure, but for me personally, because we're recovering in this part of the country from some pretty major scale flooding that will take probably a decade at least to recover from, where waters came up faster than anybody expected and people died. Well, okay, so this river in Texas rose 26 feet in 45 minutes. It's the Guadalupe River, and it was it impacted some summer camps where kids were. So there was one summer camp in particular with 750 kids in it. And the way they're organized, there's higher points and there's lower points in the camp. The youngest children were at the lowest point in their dormitories, right? Or cabins or whatever you call those. And they knew that there was some flash flooding danger, but nobody thought that it was going to be 26 feet of crest in 45 minutes, which is significant. And it happened at a time where people were not awake. So there's also not like, oh, gee, it really looks, oh, that's coming. Oh, we better go move. We're like daylight. You can see what's going on. No, it's like there's water and we got to get through the water to somewhere else. So parents lost their children this weekend to the flooding. They said, like, think about this as a parent. You have sent your child off to summer camp so that they can learn something about being in nature and making, build the confidence that you get from being away from home for a little while and dealing with that homesickness and all the good things that happen at summer camp. And their children are never coming home. And the director passed away trying to save children. The way it happened from an evacuation standpoint is everybody did the best they could to evacuate kids, and they ended up all over the place. And so then, like, some parents just didn't know because kids were missing who'd already been rescued, but they didn't know because who knew where anybody was, right? This is one where I don't have the assets close by to get out there and help right now. I don't have that. In Tennessee, we could actually start deploying assets to East Tennessee to help in East Tennessee. But here's what I know. Somebody does. And the Red Cross is not the person or the organization to support in this. The way to support, if you want to financially support, is find somebody who's actually connecting the people on the ground with resources, organizations that are sending people in to continue rescue efforts. And they also will need to rebuild there. But bigger than that, we've got a lot of families who've lost people. And I can tell after talking to folks who have been through the East Tennessee and North Carolina flooding, that PTSD of that situation doesn't go away. Losing your loved ones, you don't stop mourning them just because you're able to start building your house again, right? So there's a longer term way to help, and I don't know what it is, but when I do, I'll share it here. And if you hear about organizations or groups we should help, let me know. Always pay attention to what Grindstone's doing. I don't know if they're going to feel called to go there or not. And I haven't kept up to date on anything they're saying, so I still don't know. But I do know that the best help is from citizen to citizen and from neighbor to neighbor and from brother to sister and sister to brother and brother, like all of that. So, and then do keep these families in your prayers because they're going through emotional, like something I can't even imagine. So, Hey Alabama says fear-mongering weather reporters have caused weather fatigue. It's it's interesting. One of the reasons I like Ryan Hall is that he goes live and he's all excited about the tornadoes or whatever he's covering, but he also is realistic. He'll say like, this one's bad, so you should go to cover, and this is why, and this is what it looks like, and this is how it happens. But he doesn't seem frantic like it's the end of the world as we know it with this, whatever weather thing. So yeah. Hey Alabama says it doesn't matter what it is or where it is. If it happens in the middle of the night after people are in bed, it's going to be bad. Yeah, that's how Nashville was so bad. The Nashville flood of 2010, people woke up on second stories of their homes and were already floating on their mattresses. And people on the lower floors were already dead. And that was another situation. That one actually was probably amplified by the government, like the Army Corps, not letting water out because they were trying to avoid a situation and then having to let the water all out at once, where earlier in the day, they, again, hindsight's 2020. You don't know what you don't know. But earlier in the day, had they said, like, everybody just needs to get out, we're going to start letting water out, stuff's going to flood. There's never a good answer. It's always easy to sofa armchair sort of quarterback the situation in hindsight. And that's one where when I heard what had happened, 26 feet in 45 minutes, that's similar to what happened in Waverly, where you just saw houses underwater in less than 5 minutes, or it was 11 minutes or something, because a bridge had been holding back debris and then it opened, and there's only so much you can do in that situation. And only so much you can know in advance. And there's so many times where it could be flooding and then it doesn't, that then we kind of get immune to the statement that it might flood or it might tornado or whatever. Anyway, I wanted to take some time before we jumped into today's show to talk about that and ask for everybody to, whatever religion you are or not, prayers, thoughts, whatever it is, send that positivity out there as best you can. And if there's a way you can help and you feel called to help. And if I find a way to help, I'm going to help. Right. So, and I'll share that with you guys as it goes forward. But that was kind of on my mind this morning when I got up. Anyway, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about being the victim versus being the victor, which is a topic many people have talked about. So that terminology is not some original thing I had, but I really got to thinking about it this weekend. And we haven't talked about this as a topic in a while. And in fact, I kind of wish Jenny was on the show with me today, because she's completely changed her mentality from victim to victor over the last, 8 or 9 years since I've known her. And the reason we're talking about this is it leads to an important question. How important is your perspective? Because a lot of times we talk about mindset, we talk about perspective, blah, blah, blah. And we talk about putting things out there to move that direction as if it's magically moving you that direction. And I don't know that that's the case, but I do know that perspective matters, and it does guide our everyday decisions from there. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to cover our usual Monday segments, except for I don't have a frugality tip or a shopping report. So there's not a lot of Monday segment today, except for the one I just added before we even started the show. Before we do that, I want to talk about our featured event of today's show, and it is on July 26th. This is actually a great experiment, this event. And it's home canning food for preservation. So it's canning 101 in essence. It's oriented towards somebody who hasn't canned, who bought the canner and didn't ever take it out of the box, took it out of the box, looked at it, went, oh no, that's scary. Or who has just started canning and feels a little not so confident, right? So if you've been canning for 20 years, this is not the canning class for you. But you might come anyway, I don't know, just because you want the charcuterie lunch. But I've done a lot of home canning classes, and it turns out I've never done one at the Holler Homestead, except for in the context of the spring workshop. We've done some canning demonstrations. So I was realizing, I was like, I've got all of this curriculum. That's pretty cool. And we've never done it here. So we're doing it July 26th, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And it's the first time we're doing a class at base camp, which is where the Holler Hub is going to be centered out of, including the buying club and all the other things and the camping cabins, and all the things we've talked about, right? So it'll be there July 26th, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Bring your notebook and a good attitude. And we will be doing the hands-on water bath and pressure canning in a small group setting. So only 8 students, 7 seats are currently left, right? So it's there. It's $145. That includes your lunch. You're going to get a canning cheat sheet that I use. It's sort of like a little guide of all the things I need to remember. I'm going to be giving away a starter kit for some folks. It does not include a canner, but it's some other things. And Holler roast coffee, of course, a jar of salsa that we make that day. And the charcuterie lunch is going to be some commercially produced like cheeses and meats, but also produce that we're growing on the homestead. Homemade cheese, I'm sure, will be involved in that, as well as other pickled things. So you can find that at livingfreeintennessee.com. I also want to thank 2 sponsors before we jump into our first segment of today's show. The first sponsor is The Exit and Build Land Summit. Not the Exit and Build Land Summit. Live Free Academy. Live Free Academy has the encore. They're calling it an encore event for the Exit and Build Land Summit, which has the presentations from the Land Summit. And I will tell you, that was probably the best presentation I've given in my entire life, was at the Exit and Build Land Summit. So that's part of it. I do understand that some of the video of my presentation had some corruptions, so it may be audio with a picture for part of it. Don't worry, I didn't have slides because I knew where I was speaking, and I didn't know that if they would have, a stable way for me to show slides. So that part, like, it's fine with just the audio. It was designed that it would work with just me there and just the audio, so that people didn't have to see presentations. In fact, all of my presentations are basically designed that way. But they've also included like a VIP package where you can get I guess it was 4 or 5 hour Joel Salatin intensive that happened the day after the summit. I went to that. That was fantastic, where just sort of in a group setting, we could assault him with lots of questions. And he had lots of gems to say. So there's a link for that in the show notes. If you use the link, they know I sent you. I do get a little commission for that. Just full transparency on that. But I think if you miss the summit and that's a topic you're interested in, exiting the system and building out on the land somewhere, and you've never really taken a deep dive into Polyface and how they work, Daniel and Joel talked about just like succession planning. They talked about how they developed their farm, how they developed the community that supports their farm, and lots of things in between. There were also a bunch of other great speakers at the Land Summit, so you can check that out. It's at livefree.academy. Actually, it's at exitandbuildlandsummit.com is where I think that's the link I have, but I have an affiliate link as well in the show notes. I can throw it in the comments on YouTube as well. Actually, it's probably already in the show description. So that's where it is. And they are one of today's sponsors. The second sponsor of today's show is agristtaxadvice.com. Agris Tax Advice is a service. It's run by Matthew Sursley, which if you've been to any of the events here, Self-Reliance Festival, and he's not at every single event, but he does show up. He's been actively in our community for a number of years now, and he's always willing to talk to people about the questions that they have. And he's always willing to say when it's something he doesn't know much about versus things he knows more about. So he put together a system where he advises people on how to structure their business. He looks at their finances, talks about write-offs they're taking advantage of, ones they may not be aware of, and then talks to them about how to track it, which is super cool. I can tell you this, that after working with Matthew, my books are in a much better shape because I have to communicate that piece of information to him. And I'm a person who doesn't like doing clerical. So I was every once a year going through everything and just about hating my life. Well, I hate my life a lot less now because things are just in order. And then with those insights, like the benefit we don't talk about is with those insights in place, you actually make better decisions, like long-term decisions for your business as well. So it's like a twofold thing. So check it out, agristaxadvice.com. He also has a download for you in exchange for your email, agristaxadvice.com/LFTN. Matt Haim says, my son loved your Exit and Build talk. I'm glad he got to chat with you. Yeah, I really enjoyed meeting your son. I'm going to be out there again in August, so I may see him again. I'm going to take the lunatic tour because the one thing I had was a show I needed to do during that event while they did the farm tour. So I missed the farm tour, and I've never toured the farm with Joel before. I've been there twice now. So I was like, okay, third time's the charm. Okay, with that, it's time for our first segment of today's show, Tales from the Prepper Pantry. And this is where we talk about storing what you use and using what you store. And my pantry has changed so much since the beginning of the show because I was using the grocery store more when we started the show. And over the years, as things have gotten more abundant here, and as I've taken better control of my health, I use the store less. It's interesting, right? So a lot more of what we're doing is from scratch. In fact, we had a little cookout on Friday, and I was trying to do as much as possible, sort of farm to table as part of that, but then also have food people liked. And I tried a number of recipes. If you're on the Monday mail, you'll see I had to make up a whole new recipe because my potato salad failed. And they were like, everybody loved it. They're like, these are great. These potatoes are great. And I was like, yeah, step one is put on potatoes to make potato salad and then forget and then overboil them so they're too squishy. And then you have to make this dish, right? So if you're not on the Monday mail, you missed that. But if you go to livingfreeintennessee.com, it is on my blog, so you can see that. But it's a herbed Swiss chard potato smash. It was really good. And it actually gave me an idea. So at this time of year, I end up with mountains of Swiss chard. I literally have a mountain of Swiss chard in my kitchen waiting for me. And I go out of town tomorrow, so I have to do something with it, right? And it's way more than we can eat here. And what I've done in the past is just chop it up and freeze it, which you can totally do. But then I don't like, it's not the same, especially the leaves when you use it from the freezer. So what I decided is that this dish I made on Friday is a really good way to preserve Swiss chard. So you saute up the stems of the Swiss chard so they're soft, and then you integrate it with your herbed potatoes. And I don't eat a lot of potatoes, but we do serve them at events. Meanwhile, it's potato season in Tennessee, so that's kind of cool. So I'm going to end up making up a few batches of the herbed Swiss chard potato smash, getting them in the freezer, and then I'll be able to use that at events in the future. And I can do this by tapping into Swiss chard we grew here, potatoes I source from people in the network here in the area. And we end up with that farm to table linkage at a time of year when maybe those things aren't coming on. So that's kind of cool. Plus, I use the nutrition and the benefit of having grown the Swiss chard here and keep it as nutritious as I can by doing that in a way that I will actually use and taste good. Otherwise, I'll just end up with a bag of Swiss chard stems in my freezer that I look at until at the end of the year I'm stuffing meat in there. And I'm like, never mind, you can go because, meat's harder to raise than Swiss chard is. I'm not sure that's true. Meat might actually be easier, but it seems like a higher priority thing in my freezer when I get down to that situation where you have to make those choices. We've got a second wave of cucumbers coming on. I'm going out of town tomorrow morning for the week, and I looked at the forecast, and it's going to rain every day. In fact, it just rained here. I wasn't sure we were going to have the show because it rained, and then there was thunder and lightning, and I thought, well, hopefully everything stays going. So second wave of cucumbers coming on. They're all about an inch long. I went out there today because I deep harvested today so that while I'm gone, Tactical doesn't have to harvest, except for he kind of has to harvest. He's going to have to harvest the cucumbers and tomatoes while I'm gone, but that he doesn't have to harvest everything else. And I didn't want to come back to a problem. So I deep harvested today, and I looked at those cucumbers, and I have to orient him on where they are so he knows where to look for them. But we're about to get a wave of cucumbers from just the weather cycle this year. It's been a lot wetter this year than usual. We'll probably get those at the farmer's market too. I'm hoping so, because I got cucumbers to make pickle relish and then didn't make the pickle relish. And now I'm dumping rotting cucumbers all over my yard so they can maybe vine out for the fall and or plant themselves for next year. But that means that I will have cucumbers to do something with, whether it's make pickles or pickle relish. Not sure which I'll do, but I'm kind of excited about that. And they're my cucumbers from my garden. So that's always kind of fun. I ate a frog yesterday. Not a real frog. You guys know what ate a frog means. It means doing something I've been putting off and really didn't want to do. I had a small storage shed outside, and I put some things in it 2 or 3 years ago to get the boxes of the Doom boxes out of my house so that it wasn't cluttery in here. And then I did what I usually do in that situation, which is forget those boxes exist and never come back to it. Well, about 3 months ago, I peeked in there because I was like, oh yeah, these boxes are in here. And it had gotten wet in there, and there were cardboard boxes of things. And I didn't even know what was there. I saw a couple of things. I'm like, oh yeah, I used to like that thing, right? Well, I then walked away because I was disheartened by it. And what does this have to do with the pantry? You'll find out. Just hang with me here. So yesterday, the one thing I wanted to do before I left for my trip to go help Mom with her knee replacement was to get that done so it wasn't weighing on me. Because when you have something like this, that weighing on you keeps you from doing other things that are productive because you're thinking about it every so often. You're like, oh yeah, I got to do this thing I don't want to do. And you spend more time dreading the thing than doing the thing. So yesterday after church in the morning, I was just like, I just gotta do this thing because I'm going out of town on Tuesday. And if it's not on my mind when I go out of town, I will feel better. And then if the plane crashes on my way there, then somebody else doesn't have to deal with that mess. And that was a mess of my own making, right? So I ate the frog, went out there in my grubbiest of grubbies, and it was so disgusting. But I threw most of it away. I pulled I found some stuff I needed to find that's never coming into my house, by the way. Because it got wet, mold grew, and none of that stuff is coming into my house. None of it. But some of it I need to reference. Some of it is sentimental things I'm going to take pictures of. So I have a copy of the thing without putting the thing in my house. Like letters from my grandma, for example. And I was just, the best news was this. One, I have a bin of letters from pen pals and friends throughout the world that I had back in the day when we used to like handwrite letters on stationery, right? And it was cool that wasn't there. Because what I was really worried about was that like those letters had gotten wet and then I wouldn't be able to read them again. I have absolutely no idea what those letters are right now, by the way, but I know they're one of 4 places, which is a second topic. But everything that was pretty much water damaged was like things like a big box of envelopes that had nothing in them, like there was office supplies or file folders, that sort of thing. And then everything else in there just sort of got exposed to mold air, which is why they're not coming into my house. But I got it all cleared out. I got everything in the garbage bags that needs to go to garbage. I have the things that I will want to then process into images and or look deeper. Like my high school diploma was in there and I don't think I really need it. So I'm probably going to throw it away, but I'm deciding if I want a picture of that or not. That's all handled. And that's pretty cool. What that means is it opens up more space for us to organize the pantry. And by space, I don't mean that shed. That whole shed's out. I just like, I'm not going to risk the mold situation. So that whole shed's out. And there's more space for power pantry storage, and because that stuff doesn't exist anymore. And there's a space to put a small storage shed, right? So that's all part of it. And as I was doing that, I realized that I just told you there are 4 places I can look for those letters, right? Well, that's the way my pantry is in some cases. So since the construction has finished, most of my stuff is categorized pretty well, but there are certain things that are in up to 4 places instead of just 1 place. And so this is opening up space where we can, put whatever. I like to use the, what's that called for the mosquito repellent? Ever something? Thermacell has nothing to do with ever. Thermacell for that. And we've had some crazy mosquitoes because we've had crazy rain here. So I was looking for Thermacell supplies and I can find like the gas you put in the thing, but not the little paper thing you put in there. And that's because I threw those away because they were stored outside and they were sketchy. So I realized I had those things in 3 places. So we're doubling down on categories in the pantry so that it's much easier to find things, like I already have all the tomatoes with the tomatoes and that sort of thing, but we're expanding out from the food storage to other supplies. And that's going to make a huge difference in 2 things. 1, us using what we have, right? And 2, better ability to quickly link with things so I don't waste a bunch of time looking for where the thing is. And that's when your pantry's really humming for you. It's also time to double down on drying herbs for teas and cooking. The one thing I haven't deep harvested today are the herbs and the chocolate mint and things like that I want to get drying before I leave town because they're going to go to flower while I'm out of town. I'm sure of it. So I want to get that haircut done on the mint So we have tea. We've already got a good amount of lemon balm, thanks to Michelle. And I have another round of lemon balm to harvest. And then mullein flower is going to be the other thing that comes off this week. So everybody else has already got their mullein flower. Ours are just starting to bloom. So we have a little bit of that to harvest that can be made into dried and then made into a tincture. Next up, we have Operation Independence. This is where we talk about building local ongoing revenue into our lives. And I'm super excited about that experimental canning class because it's going to be happening the way I've always wanted classes to happen here, where we can do a 4-hour class. We can feed people some good food, get that fellowship, get the learning done, and it just cleans up, right? Where it has been harder to do that with only the outside sort of options, we now have an inside option. So that's perfect for July because ain't nobody want to take a canning class outside, although part of the canning class is outside because I will do the water bath method outside so that we don't get too hot inside. But that's one of my tricks for success in canning in the summer is set up a canning kitchen outside if you can figure out any way to do it. And there's so many creative ways you can do it, right? Anyway, we also hosted a hip camper this weekend. It was our first hip camper. Boom. And they reached out and said, hey, you have 24 hours notice required, but can we come? And I said, sure. I changed it to 12-hour notice. Really, the only reason I want notice for that is that if somebody instant books at 3 p.m. on a Thursday and drives up in the driveway, or at 8 p.m. and we don't know they're coming, which could happen, that would be awkward. So it's better for us to know, and then I can make sure everything's set up. So it was only $25, but it's $25 I didn't have at the beginning of the weekend that I do have at the end of the weekend. So that's kind of cool. Anyway, time for the main topic of today's show, and that is victim or victor. How does perspective influence your success or failure? So this is where people go, oh no, Nicole is doing another self-improvement talk. Yeah, okay, I am. If you think this is about you, it is about you. I'm literally talking to you on this, but also I'm talking to me. That's why I do these, right? So the reason I'm doing this topic now is that I've been reading the book, The Fourth Turning, and so I had started reading it before and then I got stuck and then I stopped reading it. I've been reading it a little bit every morning for a while now. And the insights I'm getting from that are really, really helpful. And I do have the updated version that was put out in 2023. It has like a foreword because it was originally written in the 90s, I believe. So some things have changed. We're further along the process of the fourth turning. And that's been giving me lots of insights into a couple of things, including why different generations have mindsets they do based on what they were exposed to growing up, which is very fascinating. Also, Dean says, hard book for me to read. Yeah, you can get the audiobook too. I have the audiobook, but I am actually reading the Reedy McReed face. Holler Hub is an impossible vision. I've been sharing the Holler Hub vision with everybody. It's impossible, right? Or is it? We'll talk about that. I've been watching one of our community members get kicked in the face over and over, not literally, but just getting thrown down over and over and over. And every time she picks herself up and moves forward anyway. And so with all of those things, and then I'm watching some community members in our communities talk like they're giving up. For the fourth turning, we're in the crisis phase of the fourth turning, or we're just past it. Maybe 2020 was the crisis. Maybe we'll ramp things up just a little bit more just for fun, for kicks and giggles. The crisis phase when things unravel, right? And then we rebuild. That's where we're at. So the end then we rebuild is an important part of these turnings that happen. And that means it is time for us to choose if we're going to be stuck in the past of collapse or rebuild a better future as best we can. That's why I'm thinking about this. So really what we're talking about today is one single big question for you. Are you living in the past or are you building your future? Now, if like me, you're running around listening to 80s music, you might be living in the past, or you might just be having fun right now. I don't know. But Are you living in the past or are you building your future? Something I've realized as a Gen Xer is that the music I listened to growing up has songs that people today don't even know existed. Songs that I can tell you the words to and sing along with it. The younger generations have never heard and have no idea about. So if you're, somebody who grew up in that time and in the 90s, just if you want to have an internal I'm aging crisis, go run some of those songs that are, not the obvious ones, but maybe less obvious ones by some kid, and they'll just look at you like you're crazy. 8675309 is a really good one to do that with, by the way. Anyway, so are you living in the past or are you building your future? And lately I've caught myself telling people why some of the things around here on my homestead are the way they are. Because when I moved here, this place was trashed and it was full of trash and it was full of clutter. And I have carried the clutter foundation forward in a lot of ways, rather than telling them what we're moving towards right now, which is way more exciting. That's the hauler hub. That's, getting our systems more integrated than they already are. And we've come so far. It's a huge trap to sort of excuse why things are the way they are. And why is that a trap? Well, you're either going to be one of two ways. And I can illustrate it in the following way. I'm bad at remembering names. Okay. That's one way to say that. Or you can say, I'm getting better at remembering names. So those are two messages to yourself. One message is this place was started in a foundation of clutter and we'll never get away from it. And the other way is we're integrating these systems better so things can flow. And part of that is simplifying the things that are here. Same thing, two different things, right? Because there's some clutter around here, one of which I ate as a frog this weekend. So as a result, on the names one, as a result of telling people I'm bad at remembering names, you know what happens? You don't remember names. If you tell people I'm getting better at remembering names, you're more likely to remember their name. And it's funny how that happens. It's all in the story you tell yourself, right? The way that it's the same challenge, right? And I have been name challenged in the past, but I've been getting better at remembering names for about a year now, and I'm remembering a lot more names at this point. Sometimes I biff it. Sometimes Crystal becomes Cynthia or Cynthia becomes Crystal, and I apologize for that when that happens, but I'm getting better at remembering names. That's the victor mindset. Explaining the past reinforces it. Envisioning your future pulls you towards the future. And I don't know about you, I want to go towards the future. And this works for just about anything, It's the difference between going backward or building forward, between your ultimate failure or your ultimate success. But that doesn't mean you don't have failures along the way. And that doesn't mean bad things never happen. It's more about defining how you're going to navigate bad things that might happen. Well, they will happen. I mean, everybody has bad things happen, right? So let's first look at the characteristics of a victim, or signs that you're acting like a victim and therefore bringing more negativity upon yourself. Because the bummer of this situation is when you're in that victim space, bad things happen. And when you're in the victor space, fewer bad things happen. So the first thing that would be a sign that you are existing in or acting like a victim is you overuse the term I can't. I can't is a full sentence and it stops and there's no way out of that situation. It's gotten for me to the point where I hate I can't so much that I have worked on language, and this may sound like just I'm working on words, but when somebody invites me to a picnic on Saturday and I've already committed to a different picnic on Saturday, I do my darndest not to say I can't because I'm going to this other picnic. The truth is I could go to the second picnic. I could blow off the person. What I really mean to say is oh, I'm previously booked, so I won't be coming because I'm going to live up to what I committed to do to begin with. I had to do that recently. A friend invited me to a birthday party, and hopefully I didn't say I can't, but I said that I was previously committed to do at another event. And then on the way home from that event, you know what? We were driving near the house and we stopped and we were able to say happy birthday to our friend on his birthday. So as a matter of fact, it got, I can't turned into actually we were able to. Letty says my track coach always says I can't means I won't. It's stuck with me for 25 years. Yeah. And it's okay to won't. Like the best part about I won't is you're learning to say no and you're learning to choose those priorities, right? 2, you're explaining to friends and family all the things that has gone wrong or worked against you every time you get together. And this is where I'm going to say there's a difference between venting once in a while and dwelling on all the things that are bad. And I will tell you a story about where I dwelled on some things that were bad for a very long time. And the moment I got rid of them, things started changing for me. The moment I stopped doing that. 3, obsessing on what other people think about you. This one's hard, isn't it? Because we are raised to worry about what people think about it, say about you, or did to you, or are doing to you to undermine you. There's a paranoia there. If you're obsessing all the time about what people think. Now, I will say that when I go to the store, I decide if I'm wearing a very incendiary SOE t-shirt or a less incendiary one, based on if I want to deal with people's reactions to my shirts. I do that. And I will say there are situations where I have been traveling where women are supposed to wear skirts to go and see things, and I put a skirt on. And that is caring about what people think about you, right? But also it's being polite. So I don't know. There's a difference between assuming that other people are talking about you behind your back, think ill of you, or even overreacting to them thinking negatively of you versus going on with your life. And particularly dwelling on how people are actively undermining you puts you in a victim space where you don't want to be. And it's hard because people gossip and some people are jerks and some people literally are undermining you. So what? So what? So they're undermining you. Now you know. Your reaction to that's going to be the most important thing. A 4th thing is telling yourself you'll never get something because something else happened. I'll never have a new car because I can never get ahead in life, right? Like that sort of thing over and over. This is a message that will come true when you say it. You literally are creating the story for yourself by telling yourself that. I'll never move to a homestead because my husband doesn't want to live in the country. That might be true. Or it might not be true. Or you might get a homestead that's smaller, that's in a suburban area because you're able to communicate how it will benefit the family plan and show him that it's worth it from a family budget standpoint and do it in a way that doesn't rob him of the things he's afraid he's giving up if he moves to the country, right? So that's something that when you're telling yourself, I'll never, ask yourself what that's about. I'll never be able to blah, 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 blah. And then the 5th thing is focusing on the causes of your problems rather than the things that can solve your problems. Again, there's a balance here. If you're always focusing on the why, problem, you're stuck in the victim mindset. And if this sounds like you, the most important thing to know right now is that this mentality keeps you in the victim cycle. And if this sounds like you're in a victim cycle, and actually you just took your first step to get out of it because you're starting to become self-aware of, oh no, this might be me. So the issue with being in this mindset is you attract people and interactions that make things worse. I'll never get ahead. I'll never get my degree done. I'll never be able to afford a house. I can't even think every morning when I get up. this person's been actively undermining me at work and they're making me look bad. Like all of that stuff, all of it may be true. All of it probably is true. And when you talk about it and dwell there, more people come who do those things to you. More people come and more interactions happen based on that. And that's where it ends up firmly in your hand. You can dig into why something went for a really long time and obsess about it, or you can look at the causes of a problem and focus on finding a solution. And when you do that second thing, that's when the scales start tipping, right? So I'm going to share 2 stories. One about a knife, a literal knife, and one about my life in public policy. Years ago, I lived in North Portland, which at the time was in a transition between being ghetto and being gentrified. And the house that I lived in was one I was purchasing, and I got it for a pretty good price because it wasn't in the best part of town. That house today is probably going to sell for over $1 million. No, I didn't sell it for over $1 million, but whoever bought it from me has realized some awesome financial gains, and that's cool for them. And that's because that neighborhood changed. But I was there before it changed. I was there when there was some gunfire from time to time. But when I was there, it wasn't as bad as it had been 10 years before that. And because some restaurants were starting to feel safe enough to open nearby, I could walk to a restaurant and like have a burger and a beer and walk home. And one night I was walking home and a man came out from the alley with a knife. And he started explaining to me what he was going to do with the knife to cut me up, and he was going to rape me. And he went through a very long descriptive thing. And his friend came out too. And I looked at his friend and I said, I know who your father is. I looked him right in the eye. I said, I know who your father is. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I just stood there calmly. Well, I actually probably kept walking, but I just looked at him. And his friend grabbed the guy with the knife, pulled him in back away, and said, come on, dude, let's go. Think about how different that story would have been if I would have screamed, if I would have run, if I would have just been scared and frozen, because fight or flight or freeze, sometimes you're so terrified you freeze. I don't know what came over me that day to say those words. And as a matter of fact, I did know I knew who the guy's father was. I didn't know his father personally, but his father was a prominent construction builder dude. And because I was able to do that and didn't look like an easy victim, I was not pulled into an alley and hurt or killed. It wasn't because of my awesome training in self-defense. It wasn't because I was carrying a pistol. It was because I looked somebody in the eye and said, I know who your father is. It's really weird. I just had this thing in my hand and now it's not in my hand. Anyway, and that was a time where a victor attitude worked in my favor and kept an event from happening. The second story I'll tell you is that when I was working in public policy, there were a group of people who used me to get ahead in their careers. And they were actively undermining me. And they were, for years, taking credit for my work or keeping me from being able to do my work the way I know it needed to be done. And during that time, anybody who would listen to me, I would tell them the story of how these people were keeping me from making a difference in free market public policy. And I would play the political game and I'd get people on my side and they'd get people on their side. And it was like a whole thing. And it was very unhealthy for me. And I spent many hours working very hard to make sure they didn't win, because I was right and they were wrong and they weren't to win. That was not okay with me. Well, I did that instead of focusing on the things I could influence and getting ahead and just going on without them. By engaging with them in this way, I gave them power over me. And the day I realized what was up and forgave them and realized I was going to go on the path I was going to go on. And if they were in my way, I was just going to step around them and keep going. And if some of the people who used to be on my side were on their side and didn't come with me, that was fine. The day that happened, my whole life got better. I forgave them. I knew who they were, so I didn't work with them, but I moved on. But I was a victim for 8 or 9 years. And I don't even know why I'm still friends with some of the poor people who had to listen to me tell every single way that these people were undermining me and the paranoia. I was not a healthy person during that time because I was dwelling on it, and that just brought more unhealthy interactions and more dependency and more abuse in my direction because because I let them have power over me. I let them be relevant. I let them continue to do those things. So those are the two stories about sort of victim versus victor, and they're very different outcomes. And the funny thing is, both of them happened in sort of the same time range. So I was able to be the victor on the street, but I was not the victor in my professional life at that time. So the big question is, what does the victor look like, right? A victor takes rabid responsibility for their part in their own problems or troubles. And another reason why I'm thinking about this is John Bush just shared online about some things about how when awful things happen and people talk to you and tell you critical feedback or get mad at you or walk out in a huff or fire you, you can go into this whole state of woe is me, etc. Or you can take a moment and self-reflect and think, what was my part in this? Did I really do something that makes that happen, right? And that self-reflection can lead you to development emotionally, intellectually. And it can also, it could be that they just were crazy, but whatever. It can get you out of the obsessing on the thing that went wrong. So that you take responsibility for your part in it. Because I will say that every time somebody gives me critical feedback that actually physically hurts, like I'll have a physical pain reaction that I try to hide from you so you don't see that you're doing that to me because you're actually being kind enough to give me critical feedback. When that happens, that is a true sign that there is truth in what you're saying. And then it's like, oh no, I've done this thing and I need to do something else. It's kind of like every time I biff it on my calendar and don't show up to something that I wrote down wrong in my calendar, I feel physical pain because I know somebody was waiting for me and I don't want to do that to them, right? So taking that rabid responsibility for your part in your troubles or your part in a interaction that went wrong or your part in where you've ended up that's so bad is what a victor does. And when they do that, what happens is time over time over time, they're building their mental health, they're building their emotional intelligence, they're building their ability to communicate with people better, that sort of thing. Because when you take responsibility for it, you find ways to change for the better. Like what's your part in your debt problem? Well, were you buying things on the credit card because the instant gratification monkey needed gratification? That's how I got there, right? Or if you're in an abusive relationship, for example, I have a friend who had a violent husband. And what was her part in this? Well, the part she could control was continuing to give him access to her to hurt her. So she removed herself from the situation. So it doesn't mean every part of that is your fault, but it means taking responsibility for the things you can do something about. Victor controls their reaction to bad things so that they can make the best of it. And I don't mean like fake toxic positivity. I mean, bad things are going to happen and your reaction to the bad things are what set you up to get through them better or worse. This is why when somebody's hurt, I'm usually the second or third person there to help them. The reason I'm the second or third person there is I can control my reaction to a bad thing. And when somebody's hurt, for example, um, I was walking up the dock from my mom's house or houseboat to go home, and one of her neighbors who lived on a houseboat near her fell, and he was like blood was pouring out of his face when that happened. And I was walking with two other people, and the two people ran towards him to help. And I turned around and I went back to my mom's boat, had her hand me 2 towels and some other stuff, and then walked up to help. Because I assessed the situation. I took a minute to think, like, how can I react that will do the best good in this situation? And then I was able to provide what he needed, which was a way to stop the bleeding, right? So that's something I learned to do at the tip of Machu Picchu in Peru when I was at the top of the mountain and realized everything was going to be okay and everything happens for a reason. That was when I was 29 years old. And I went up that mountain pretty freaked out about stuff that was happening in my life, not sure which way to go. And I realized that I can control my reaction to things, and I can navigate anything unless it's the last thing I need to navigate that's going to kill me and then I'm dead. So then also it doesn't matter, right? It was like a whole thing. And if I'm able to turn a negative into a positive, I can do everything that I can do to do that. Doing that in a toxic positivity way, though, can actually undermine you. So you have to watch out about, it's not that everything's okay. You know, my cat's about to die, right? The one who just walked in here. He could die this week. He could die in 2 months, but he is 18 years old with a failing kidney. And at some point, he's going to either be at a point where he's in a lot of pain and I help him, or he just dies. And, you know, people are like, oh, that's too bad. I'm like, yeah, it's too bad. And I'm not happy about it. And I'm going to mourn him when that time comes. But right now, I'm enjoying the fact that he still likes to get like he just came in and got a pet head. And I'm enjoying the fact that he gets to eat, and like I'm making him bone broth, and we're having good times right now. And I'm doing my best to focus on the good times we can have versus how sad I'm going to be when he dies. And I'll be sad and I'll mourn him and, you know, I'll honor him, but it's also not going to ruin my life. So, a third thing that a victor does is focuses on what they can control. We've already kind of been poking around that one. Let's call it out. You focus on what you can control. This one actually hurts my heart as a reformed political junkie, not the things that are beyond your control. So you have the circle of control, circle of influence, and then everything else. And everything else is what media and social media and culture drives us to think about, rather than this is what I can actually do something about. This is why mobilizing people to help with the flooding in East Tennessee was something I could control. It was something I could do. Mobilizing people in Texas to help with the flooding might be in my circle of influence. Like if anybody is doing something there, I will gladly shout it from the rooftops from here. I'll send a special mail to my Monday mail that only gets one mail a week saying, if anybody's here, this is what you can do to help, right? That's in my circle of influence. But really being good about that helps you maintain that victor mentality. And that's the one that's going to hurt for anybody who's into the news cycle, who's, you know, concerned about the nukes coming in or the tariffs. Can you control that? No. Are you going to have to react to it if it happens? Yes. Right? So what can you control in that situation? Nothing right now. Nothing, like literally nothing. A victor sees obstacles as challenges rather than an insurmountable roadblock. And that goes back to the I can't thing, right? It's I can't versus how can I? When you run into problems, you figure out what to do next. Do you walk around it? Do you dig under it? Do you go over it? Or do you do something else to get you in the same place because that thing's just in your way? Roadblocks, the worst roadblocks are the roadblocks of your own making, and those are the easiest to get through. So, yeah, Dean says, still waiting on the White House to call and ask for my advice. Exactly. Me too, Dean. Me too. And then the fifth thing is a victor gains self-worth internally, evaluates their self-worth internally, not from the feedback from others. That one hurts, doesn't it? That means that they don't care what people say about them or if people are trying to undermine them, because their self-worth is coming from within. When you become an entrepreneur for your business, the more you can do this, the better off you are. This is something I'm still working on, guys, if I'm completely transparent about it. I gained my self-worth from knowing I do a thing. Like last October, Jack said at Self-Reliance Festival, Jack was like, "This happens because of you." And I looked at him and I said, "I know." And he's like, "Oh, I didn't think you knew that." And I was like, "Yeah, I do, but it's not something I'm prideful of. It's something that just it's my, like, we all have gifts that we can give to the world. It's that thing about me is I catalyze people to develop relationships that need to happen. And it's always happened that way. And once I realized that was a gift, I put more effort into getting better at it. And so I'm usually able to set up situations where people come across each other and help each other, which is great. Uh, but that doesn't mean other people can't do that too, right? That doesn't mean I'm, the only person who can do it or the best at it. I'm just, it's my gift that I give to people. So that self-worth or sense of purpose comes from within, not without. Not like, am I wearing the right prepper gear? I mean, I am in my uniform today in an SOE shirt, right? But am I wearing the right prepper gear? Or have I taken all the best pistol classes or self-defense classes? Or do I have the biggest building full of whatever and I'm showing it to people, so I need their reassurance or their confirmation that I'm a good prepper? No, that's not how we do that. When it comes from within, then it doesn't matter what other people say, and then it's easier to separate and forgive people when they do things like undermine you actively. And that's now a roadblock that you walk around because it just doesn't matter anymore. They don't have any power. They're not renting space in your head, as somebody said in the comments earlier. So yeah, Pip and I said it. That sounds like they had free rent in my head. Absolutely. And that is under my control. Not giving people rent in my head is under my control. And that's probably the most important thing to do, is how somebody treated me is not fair, blah, 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 right? Get that out. It might not have been. Okay, well, that tells me not to let them do that to me again. That's all it tells me. If I don't want that done, don't interact with that person in that way, or don't interact with them at all. Just depends on what your best solution is. So think about this. Those two lists are very similar to the difference between a poverty mindset and an abundance mindset. And it's not just about money, right? It's about creativity. It's about mental health. It's about emotional health. It's about connection. It's about opportunity. And all of it is connected. And a victor will ask, how can I? A victim will say, I can't. That's the biggest difference between the two. So when you hear yourself saying, I can't, ask yourself, is it bad programming because I'm double booked that day and I already am going to go to this wedding instead of go out to a movie with a friend? Well, I mean, nobody's going to fault you for that, right? You're going to the wedding. I won't be coming out with you to the movie because I'm going to my niece's wedding or whatever, right? The victor will ask, how can I, when there's a problem? A victim will say, I can't because, I can't possibly ever get a car again because I was hit and it broke the tire off the front of my Tahoe. That happened to me last year. I have a car. I didn't get straight into the car that I wanted, but I ended up in a car and I'm getting the things done I need to do with that car. It happened. It just took a little extra work. It's how can I get the right kind of car? I need one with 4-wheel drive. I need a truck that can haul things. We need an extra vehicle in the hauler so that when one car goes down, then we have a backup car for everybody. So we bought a 2-wheel drive truck, which Tactical is not fond of, but it can haul my camper. It just can't haul it through mud, right? Or into weird places. And then my 4-wheel drive vehicle is the Subaru right now, which may blow up in another year. Who knows? But it's doing what it needs to do. And it has a trailer hitch, so I can pull some things out, but it can't pull my camper. So the deal with that is if I'm going to use my camper and it looks like it's going to be really sopping wet, then we pull it out before the sopping wet comes, which is something you can actually do. And other than that, we use either his Jeep or my Subaru for 4-wheel drivey things that we need to do with trailers and such. And then we have all the bases covered. Because I asked, how can I? Because what was not going to work for me was buying a brand new Toyota 4-wheel drive thing at that moment. I did not want to put that much money into it. I could have, but I didn't want to, right? So that, you see where that is with the victor mentality. And that sort of hurts when you hear it, right? It sort of hurts knowing a victim will say, I can't, and the victor will ask, how can I? Because owning your failures and victories means you have to feel the pain of every stumble you make without blaming somebody else. And not blaming is what gets you on the path towards moving forward. One might say, I am victim blaming when I get to this point, though. When I say you're responsible for your role in things, because sometimes it's just a jerk you've been dealing with, but that's missing the point. Because responsibility is different than fault. Responsibility means power. Blaming means giving up power. It means letting that rent come into your head. So let's go to an extreme here. Hypothetically speaking, and I told you the nice story earlier, let's say I got attacked and raped. That would seem random, but is it? What was my role in getting attacked and raped? Did I end up around the wrong people because I was focused on things I couldn't control rather than making sure I stayed on track for my future dreams? Like, was I putting myself into a situation where criminals were who might attack me and rape me? Was I hanging out with people who were in that lifestyle? Was I walking unconfidently and so I looked like an easy victim? Was I in my phone and so I looked like an easy victim? Yeah, that one hurts, doesn't it? Did I not train enough in self-defense, or did I not train enough with my pistol to turn the language from that? I will tell you that I did not have a pistol on me in Portland when that happened. Did I leave my pistol at home that day? And that could have helped me, but it wasn't there. Or was there a serial rapist around who preferred blonde-haired old ladies like me? In this above analysis, in that analysis, it's kind of a sensitive topic because when I talk about this, all of these things could be true. And if we talk about that in the context of an attack and a rape, it sounds like victim blaming. And that's because we live in a binary world where people think two things cannot be true at one time. It can be true that I would have avoided that hypothetical rape had I been carrying a pistol and well trained, or simply looked more confident going in. It can also be true that the person who raped me, hypothetically, was completely in the wrong and was a serial rapist who was targeting brown-haired ladies. Those two things can be true at the same time. And examining that aspect of the situation, the pieces that I can control, is how I can avoid a similar situation happening in the future. So when something as terrible as being attacked and raped happens, examining, did I have a part in this? What could that part have been, and what could be done differently as I move forward without killing my quality of life, right? Could avoid a repeat or a similar situation. And that's where the victor is. That's not victim blaming to ask that question. But boy, is that a hard discussion to have, because where you are mentally after something like that happens is not ready to have that conversation, probably, right? So the victor part of that situation, or the victor in a terrible situation, will take steps to address the mental trauma of having had something happen, and to address the physical trauma of having had something happen, and find a way to build just one little piece at a time so that that never happens to them again, and hopefully doesn't happen to somebody else, and to be the best person they can be after something like that happens. The victim will end up with their life ruined forever after something like that happens. So this kind of reminds me of our recent episode with Tactical about his PTSD. He was a victim for many, 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 many years. As a result of that, his relationships with his family were not great. And then one day he decided to live. And it took many more years from that time, when he went from victim to victor, to move past the hate and the trauma into a place where he could rebuild. But it took that moment of saying, what is my part in this and what can I change, that started him on the path towards being the victor and not the victim. And a big part of this is forgiveness, forgiving yourself, forgiving other people who have wronged you, and letting go of the hate is the hardest part, because you'll hate somebody who does something like that to you. I went through many years of an emotion eating problem. It's probably why I'm kind of a portly person. Just saying. And I went to a psychologist because I was in a place where I was taking control of my health and getting really good about what I put in my body. And what would happen was at a specific time of day, it was like another creature took over my body and I wanted to have, whatever. I couldn't keep chocolate in my house because I would eat all the chocolate. So I kept my chocolate in Tactical's house. And then I'd have to ask for a chocolate bar. So I just had one, right? So that's what I mean by emotion eating. And so we dug into my past. And this is telling you to do everything that's not right, right? Like you're digging into your past, you're finding out why. No, I needed to know why to make the change. So I went in and we talked about my past. And what I realized was that I had not figured out, without feeling overwhelmed, how to deal with feelings of loneliness. And so my way to deal with feelings of loneliness was to put something in my mouth that tasted good. And so it kept happening at the same time of day because that's when I started to feel lonely, because I was alone at that time of day. And then to settle myself enough, because it was nighttime, to settle myself enough to get to sleep, I would eat. And, when you have a baby and they cry, what do? Right? Literally that link. By realizing that, I realized that if I feel lonely or need to settle myself to go to sleep, there are a million other things I can do besides eating something to do that. And that busted through the tendency to emotion eat, which was something that had just been in my life. So sometimes you do need to look at the past to be the victor. But what I couldn't do is dwell in my past and be like, oh no, mom taught me to emotion eat because she gave me a bottle when I was crying, or whatever it is that you can absorb on that. And I think that's kind of the risk when we go to a psychologist, is some psychologists get really like deep into the past and they keep you there. And if they're not helping you build blocks towards being a better future, what are they even doing? So be careful who you go to for something like that too, because you want somebody who's going to help you find solutions and coping mechanisms that are positive, rather than get stuck in that cycle over and over and over. So how do you become the victor when you're stuck as a victim? That's the $100 question of this show, right? 1, recognize where you are. That's the first step towards owning your future. If I was talking about victim and you're like, oh no, that's me. Well, okay, you just took the first step. Now you just got to take the second step, right? That's my toxic positivity for this episode. Shift your mindset first from being helpless to being proactive, and start asking yourself the question, what's my responsibility in this situation? What do I have control over, right? So know that you can't control. No, know what you can control and what you can't control, and embrace what you can control and your reaction to bad things. And when something really awful happens, it's not terrible to stop for a second and be like, okay, this terrible thing's happening. Usually I would just start yelling. Is that going to get me what I want? What do I want out of this situation? Okay, what I want is this thing. Yelling's not going to get me there. That's like a really good one on, the phone when something went wrong with your Amazon order. Yelling at the CSR does not necessarily help you. They have the control to make things right or not, right? They may not have as much control as you think, but they have some of that control, and you want to leverage that as much as possible. Number 4, kill the negative thoughts and paranoia about people undermining you, and ask yourself, how can I do this? And if somebody is undermining you and you realize, ask yourself, how can I go around that? How can I just move on with what I want? Because if you dwell on the undermining, or why they're doing it, or what their intention is, or why they're a big poopy head, you're just going to be, they are taking up space in your head rather than you using the full power of what's here, you know, that gray matter up there, to make things that you want to have happen. And then the hardest one is to forgive yourself, forgive those around you. It's okay not to forget, though. Just because you forgive doesn't mean you forget. But when you truly do forgive, it frees you up to move the direction you need to go. And then, of course, from there, you set boundaries. Number 6, set boundaries to keep yourself building your future rather than getting pulled back into the past, into those unhealthy cycles. That choice to build forward instead of staying broken is what changes everything. If you like the show and want to support the work we're doing here, you can do it in 2 ways. Get your coffee at hollowroast.com or become a member. Find out more about that at livingfreeintennessee.com. With that, go out, make it a great week.